You tell me if everything's okay because I don't see.
Yeah, but
Yes,
try to
Yeah.
present.
that
I'm
part.
going to try to present. And now I don't see anything, so you have to tell me.
We are waiting.
Still waiting?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to do it again. Okay, so can you see now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, this is not happening now. Now?
No.
Oh my goodness. So,
But you
Professor,
can present like that, maybe.
I'm going to try one more time. And if it not, we'll have to present the other way. But what about if I do this? Can you see now?
Not at all.
Okay, don't worry, don't worry. Give us a couple of seconds because this was working just now.
Yeah.
Now, can you see?
Don't worry. If you cannot share the presentation, you can still present it. Well, I think it's working.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good job. Good job.
I told you it was working. So, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
We are here to present a super interesting story, a very short but interesting story, and it is called An Occurrence at a Old Greek Bridge. Okay, so here we have Lisette Becerra, Javiera Bustamante, and myself, Ignacia Bravo, and I hope you enjoy.
Okay, let's start. So first, we are going to have a review about the general information of the book. So first, the full title is An Occurrence at the Old Creek Bridge. The author is Ambrose Bierce. This type of work is a short story, and the language used is English. Then the date of the first publications is 1819. 90, sorry. The narrator is limited omission and uses the stream of consciousness narrative style, which will be explained further. And also, the setting time is between 1861 and 1865, which represented the American Civil War. And finally, the setting place is the Northern Alabama, United States. Maria Ignacia, can you please go to the next slide? Okay, so now we are going to have an introduction about of the author's biography. So yes, please. Thank you. So Ambrose Bierce was born in 1842 in Meigs County, Ohio. His parents were farmers, and he was the 10th of 13 children, and all of whom were given names beginning with the letter A. Okay. In the 1846, the family moved to Indiana. And some years later, he entered to the Kentucky Military Institute. And at the outbreak of the Civil War, he enlisted in the Union Army. Then Bierce fought in numerous military engagements, and then in a military expedition to San Francisco, he left the army in 1867. Then Bier's earliest poetry and prose appear in the California Magazine, which was one of his first jobs. And then some years later, he was hired as the editor of another newsletter, and he wrote his famous Stone Crier column. Then he gained experience as a journalist and moved to England, where during a 3-year stay, he wrote for some famous magazines in that country and acquired the nickname of Bitter Beast, referring to his narrative style. all his work and experience provide him like a regular outlet for his essays, for his short stories that subsequently were collected in his first publication, official publication, called Tales of Soldiers and Civilians in 1891. Okay, and in these collected tales, these short stories, one of them was an occurrence at Oak Creek Bridge. Then he was described as a committed opponent of hypocrisy and prejudice and corruption. And finally, in 1914, he informed some of his closest friends that he intended to travel to Mexico to join Poncho Villa's forces as an observer, not a soldier, during that country's civil war. But then when he traveled, um, they never heard from him again. And it is a mystery that the circumstances of his death are still uncertain. So the next
Okay.
topic.
Yes, historical context. Well, as it was mentioned, this book was written during the Civil War, uh, United States Civil War. Okay, so an occurrence, an old Greek bridge, sorry, was published in 1891. Okay, through the setting of Civil War, as I already mentioned. This war was fought from 1861 to 1865. And as a fun fact, it's not fun, but fun fact, it was claimed that 525,000 lives were lost during this war, and even the Second World War II, only 400 lives were lost. So there were a lot of deaths during this war. Okay, so Civil War was a bloody conflict that began in the States with, give me 2 seconds. I can't mute myself, so you will have to hear that too. I'm very sorry. I can control that. So, so this war was fought with the states from the northern America and the southern America. Okay, so this war was mainly to end slavery. During this war, the president was Abraham Lincoln, and as you may know, Abraham Lincoln was the father of liberty, and he promote the liberty in the Constitution. Okay, but the southern states, they didn't want to get slavery down, so they argue that U.S. Constitution gave them the right to do so. If they chose to have slaves, it was okay. So, which is not. So a decision was made in 1861 to organize a guerrilla farewell against the Union troops. Okay, these guerrillas would infiltrate camps behind the battle lines and disrupt enemies' um, ammunition, communication, supplies. Everything, every of this was made blowing up bridges, because as you may know, bridges connect to areas, and in those times there were a lot of bridges. So if they blew up the bridges, the enemy wouldn't have the connection, so the war would be lost or won, depending on who was doing everything. Okay, so here we can see the southern state. The red ones are the confederate states that were on with slavery, and they had slaves and they didn't want to give up slavery. And the blue ones, the blue ones are the ones that decided that freedom was for everybody, and they liberates slaves. And the ones that are in like light blue are those states didn't existed in the past. Okay, so we're only going to focus on the ones that are dark blue. Okay, dark blue is free slavery, like no slavery at all, and red ones are the ones like no, we need slaves, and why would we give up slaves and everything? So yes, civil war. That is the context. So narrator point of view. Okay, narrator's point of view. This is a third person limited omniscient. The narrator knows that Peyton's Farquaad thinks and how he feels. And he's able to go into great detail about his hanging. That I'm, spoiler alert, he's hanged. However, since the narrator knowledge is limited to Farquaad, we don't know much about the Union soldiers and how they execute them. Spoiler alert again. If the narrator let us know into the mind of the soldiers, we might have a different point of view in order to understand Farquhar's hanging. Instead, the limited point of view that we are given in this book, it focuses only the attention on the inner workings of Farquhar's mind as he's hanging to death. So no more spoilers. I'm sorry. Setting.
Okay, so regarding the setting, we are first introduced to a railroad bridge over the river in northern Alabama. The events of the story take place during the American Civil War, as Maria Ignacia said, and this took place between 1861 and 1862. But it is possible that this date can be a little narrow regarding the story. So then in the second part of the story, we are told that Peyton Farquhar chafes at the fact that he has been unable to serve the Confederate Army as a soldier. And it is in this section that we are also told that the Battle of Corinth was met with disastrous results. And this battle was a Union victory in October of 1862. It is likely that the story is taking place during the spring of 1863. The Union spy tells Farquhar about the wood up against the bridge, and he specifically mentions that the wood is from the previous winter. And once Farquhar begins imagining his cave, the events are occurring in his mind. However, he is still imagining the places in Alabama at that time. And there is an image, a picture that it is like an example of how the bridge was. Maria Ignacia, please.
Yeah. So no more
Okay,
spoilers.
so no more spoilers. Now the plot summary. Upon a railroad bridge in Alabama, a man is waiting to be hanged. His hands are tied behind his back, and a rope encircles his neck. He's standing upon a platform constructed of loose boards, and there are members of the Federal Army that were the Union Army during the Civil War, and they are also on the bridge. Some of them are completing the preparations, and some of them are guarding the bridge. The man about to be hanged, Peyton Farquhar, is just a civilian. On one side of the stream is a forest, and on the other side is a fort. And halfway between the bridge and the fort is then a line of soldiers, and they are all armed. When the soldiers finish their preparations, they move off of the bridge, and a sergeant stands at the opposite end of the same board as Farquhar. And at the signal from his captain, he will step off the board. The board will then tilt down, and Farquhar will fall through the railway ties. Um, Farquhar then closes his eyes to think of his family, but he is completely distracted by a sharp sound, and he tries to figure out what that sound is and how far this sound is, too. Then he finds he is waiting with impatience for the toll, which seems to come less frequently then. And this sound is so loud that it actually hurts his ears. What he hears actually is just the ticking of his watch. And Farquhar then opens his eyes and looks at the stream, and he starts to think that if he could free his hands, he might be able to dive into the water and swim away from his executioners. and he will then flee for home, which is still outside of the territory held by the Union Army. And as he's thinking, the surgeon steps off of the board. Then the story flashes back to Farquhar and the circumstances that led to his hanging. And though he was a southern plantation owner, he was unable to serve in combat. And he longed for the glory of a soldier's service and waited for the chance to prove that he possessed courage and that he was brave enough to be there. And one evening, a Confederate soldier stopped at the plantation, and Farquhar asked for news of the war. He was a curious man, and the Yankees were pushing forward. The soldier told him that they were repairing the railroads and had built a fort near Old Creek Bridge, and the Yankee commander had issued an order to hang any civilian caught interfering with the railroad. Farquhar then asked about the bridge, and the soldier put in his mind how easily the bridge will burn. Then, an hour later, the soldier passed the plantation again, heading north, and he was returning to Yankee territory, for he was a scout for the Union Army. Then the story returns to the present, and as Peyton Farquhar falls between the railway ties of the bridge, losing consciousness. The sharp pain in his neck then, and a feeling of suffocation, bring him back to a state of awareness. He is then incapable of rational thought, and he splashes into the stream. He is again then able to think, and he knows that the rope has broken. His body sinks toward the bottom of the stream, and without realizing it, he starts to free his hands, and which then loosen the rope at his neck. And his hand drives him to the surface of the water. And after a breath of air, he finds uh, he finds he has an amazing awareness of his surroundings. He can feel each ripple of water. He can see the colors shining in the dewdrops of the grass, and he can also hear the body of a fish parting the water. He also sees the fort and the soldiers who are shouting and pointing at him. And then a bullet strikes the water inches from his face, and he hears the orders to fire. He now dives in under the water and under a hail of bullets. And when he resurfaces, he is farther downstream. He knows he must get out of the soldiers' range soon, really soon, because the officer will give his soldiers the order to fire at will. And they even fire a cannonball at him. But fortunately, the water throws him upon the bank opposite from the fort, and he runs into the forest and travels all day. And at nightfall, he stumbles upon um, a road that leads him in the direction of his home. It is a white road and yet eerily empty, with no one, and is traveling with no one traveling on it, and the fields or homes alongside it. His throat, his eyes, and his tongue are all swollen, and despite his suffering, he continues walking. He believes he has fallen asleep while walking, for he finds he is at the gate of his own home, and his wife is on the veranda to meet him. And as he is about to embrace her, he feels a sharp blow on the back of his neck, and he sees a bright white light, and there is just blackness. And here we can see that Peyton Farquhar has died, and his body, he has the neck broken, and this body swings beneath the timbers of Old Creek Bridge.
Nice. Okay, so themes. First, we have brutality of war. So, well, we already heard the story. We know that Farquhar couldn't go to war because he wasn't accepted in the military. So he always dreamt about going into war and the glory that that should give you. But after he's hanged, he learns that there is no glory or romance about war. There is a that is a brutal exercise to humans, and it finds no value in humans' life. Like death becomes a merely occurrence, like, oh, someone died, you know. So then we have death and disillusionment. Okay, so it goes along with, I already said that war gives death glory and dignity, as well as it gives the it becomes an occurrence in everyday life. But Farquhar learns that the conventions do not mitigate the personal horror of facing death. Okay, and physiological escape at the moment of death, like I'm pretty sure that everybody have heard that when you're about to die, you see your whole life at the minute, like in a minute before dying. Well, this is not what happened to Farquaad, but he escapes onto his mind while he was hanging there. So the fear of dying and the will to live distort reality, and provides Farquhar a psychological escape. Like he can feel how he runs away from the soldiers, how he gets back home, but this was in a mere seconds. Like I don't know how much it takes for someone to die while you are hanging, but like it must be very quick. So it was a mere like a minute, where he imagined and he dreamed like he was escaping from the soldiers. Like you heard that there were bullets and a cannon, and he escaped all of that, like against all of human nature. And he could face his wife again. Like, okay, so it was escaping. Okay, so time. Uh, the author uses this concept of time, like the most long the longer part of the text was the second part, the one that is the psychological escape of Farquaad. So uh in every moment of on the story, the author makes believe the reader that Farquaad has actually escaped death. So, but at the end of the story, we can see that it jumps back to the beginning where he's just hanging there. So the concept of time, like we can perceive the second part of the story while he was escaping in his own mind, like as a day easily, but it's not. It's seconds. It's second, a minute. It was his escape of reality. Okay, so death and dying. It has to do a little more about what I already mentioned, that war gives glory to death. Like if you die during the war, you are a hero. But it's actually not like that. It makes death a mere occurrence in everyday life. Like I already mentioned, the numbers of civilians and soldiers that died during the Civil War in America, it was 525,000 million, sorry, 500,000 persons. So that is a number that now we are only reaching through a sickness, a disease, a sickness, a virus. So it's not fun, and it's not fun to dream about being a soldier and go kill your enemy for some reasons that you cannot even understand, like if you are fighting for your government. And dreams and reality. Well, here it has to do with the same as we use dreaming to escape from reality. I'm pretty sure that it has to do also with the concept of time. For instance, when we are like in a very stressful moment, it feels like hours, but it could be like 5 minutes. So we face those situations, going through a safer place in our minds to going through um, a quiet place in our minds, because we cannot do anything at the moment, and that's what the author is trying to point out here with dreaming to escape from reality.
Okay,
Girls?
can you hear me? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So now moving on to the characters. First, we have Peyton Farquhar. He is the most important character in the story. He's also important that through much of the story, he's almost the only character, since most of the other characters that we are going to mention later don't even have names, just are called by their professions, because all of them were soldiers. Um, Now focusing on Farquhar, he is a loyal Southerner. He comes from a prosperous background and carries the air of an aristocrat about him. He is a slave-owning planter who supports the Confederation rebellion. He is approximately 35 years old and he's married and loves his family. However, Farquhar has a thirst for glory and sees himself as a prospective hero. Unfortunately, Farquhar doesn't know himself or the situation well enough to achieve this prospective hero, but he thinks he does in his mind and his psychological escape. He is a hero enough that he tries to sabotage the old creek bridge, and he is foolish enough to try to do so. After this Union spy that Lizette mentioned before mentions the bridge to him, and he's tricking Farquhar into getting caught and also being hanged. Um, Ignacia, can you please?
I did it.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. The second one is Mrs. Farquhar. She is Farquhar's wife, and she embodies innocence and domestic safety for him, which was commonly seen in women's representations at that age, specifically when they were married to a soldier. Okay, so although throughout the story, she is almost entirely imagined presence, but the only time she appears as an actual physical being is when the Northern Scout, this Union spy, asks her to fetch him with a drink of water. She also exists to reflect her husband's glory, and also always supports his need for position and prize that he wanted and needed to have. And as I said before, she stands as a stereotypical feminine type or ideal. She was a servant, beautiful, as you can see in the picture, and also silent because she was always in the shadow of his husband. And in the final moments of Farquhar's life, when he appeared in this railroad and then he finds his um, way back home and tries to hug her, she is the source of the comfort that Farquhar needed in his ultimately denied. So the next slide, please. Okay, thank you. Then we have the captain and the lieutenant. There were two anonymous union. Well, first the captain was an anonymous union captain in charge of Farquhar's hanging. Then we have the lieutenant, sorry, the anonymous union part of the military, and he is in charge of the company of Union soldiers at Old Creek. Then we have the privates and the sentinels, two anonymous privates and Union soldiers who ward the Old Creek Bridge during Farquhar's hanging if he tried to escape. Then we have the sergeant, the anonymous unanimous sergeant that direct Farquhar's preparation for hanging, and he was next to the captain in these visual aids that we have in some videos. And finally, the Union Scout, who was an anonymous Union spy who visits Farquhar plantations as an uncovered like enemy for him. And I have to say, and that's finally that these characters are present in the story, but I will say that they are second characters since the most significant one is Peyton Farquhar itself. So, okay, so first we are going to take a look to the symbolisms, and the first symbolisms that we are going to look at is the bridge. Okay, so the Oak Creek Bridge is not only the setting place of the whole story, but bridges are commonly symbols in dreams and arts because they are located in a specific place, which are crossing rivers, and they symbolize change. Okay, so to cross a bridge is to move from one place, literally or metaphorically, to another, and symbolizes characters making a journey or crossing boundaries, even though with these difficulties they may have, which is represented in the river. In particularly, bridges often represent places where heroes make the transition from one realm to the next one, and such as when they pass from life to death or to afterlife. And this is certainly applied to Farquhar, who, as a man that was about to be executed, he's trying to cross this boundary from life into death. And when he attempts to escape by shifting from reality to this world of fantasy that was related in the part two, the section two of the story, it turns out that Farquhar is still on the bridge, but from which his dead body was swung. Then the second one, the next slide, please, is the road. Roads are often represented a path through life, or the metaphorical thought that it represents when someone has to choose which road to take in a decision, maybe in a stressful moment. And in part three specifically, Farquhar emerges from a forest and finds this railroad, or this commonly known as road, but there is nothing normal about it. I mean, he can see the stars, and it was during the day. I think it was during the morning when he was executed. And for one thing, the road showed no signs of human habitation. So where it was just this forest and the road alongside. However, Fargo continues down the road trying to escape from the soldiers and the missiles, and despite the atmosphere, he eventually leads back home. And but when the road is imaginary in his head, he's a part of Farquaad's imagination, and so there is no home to which he returned. He tried to say goodbye to his family because he couldn't hug his wife, and his journey on the road has different meanings. But the first one is that Farquhar sees the road as a strange and, I would say, disturbing place, because in truth, this place, it leads him to death.
Okay, so then we have Old Creek, and here is the river itself. And rivers act as boundaries, dividing one portion of land from another. And the waters are continuously moving and changing. Often, when someone crosses a river, it symbolizes that you're moving from one realm to another, similarly as Javiera mentioned before with the bridge. And when Farquhar imagines that the news has broken and he has dropped into the creek below, the waters of the river allow him to escape and return home, but this happens only in his mind. Then the old dual symbolism is considered to be perfect for Bir's story because its main character meets his death by hanging due to his ignorant pursuit of glory and heroism. Folklore also goes to a world of his own, devising as he dies, and imagining that he has fallen into the creek, which magically transports him to shore, so he can make his journey home, taking him across the boundary from reality to imagination. And finally, the driftwood, and as it makes its way down river, this represents both Farquhar's unattainable freedom and Farquhar himself, as he begins imagining his own escape in the water. At first, the driftwood distracts Farquhar from thoughts of his wife and children, but later it becomes an extension of Farquhar himself, as Farquhar imagines floating in the water as though he is driftwood. The driftwood also indicates Farquhar's distorted sense of time, and as he looks down, he sees the water racing madly beneath him, and then he sees the dancing driftwood. He is struck by how slowly it seems to be moving in the suddenly sluggish stream, and this abrupt change in his perception marks Farquhar's transition from reality to fantasy, and then the driftwood thus serves as its ultimately representation of an unobtainable freedom. And finally, we have some two interesting facts we discovered when reading the story. And that the first one is that Beers wrote most of his best stories, including this one, during a period of less than 4 years. It took them just 4 years to write them. And that Beers himself saw two men executed by hanging during the Civil War. So this seems to be like
Inspiration
yeah.
for this story.
Yeah. And that's it.
Yes, I hope you like the story. It was an interesting story.
Pretty good story.
Emotionally.
Thank you,
So,
ladies. Thank you very much. Let's see if there are some questions from the audience, right? First, to start, your impressions after reading this book. How long this story is
It's
in
like
terms
10
of
10
pages?
pages long.
pages.
Okay.
yes, impressions. Well,
Yes.
it's, um, I would find it a deep story. Besides, it is short. It is a deep story because we are always told that it told by stories, so by like movies, that there is seconds before you die where you see your whole life pass through your eyes, and like that is like common knowledge, it could be said, thanks to movies. And there is a lot of movies that represent that, and a lot of books, like for instance the beginning of 100 years of Cien años de soledad,
Yes.
which plays with the time like this. I think it's very deep to write what the author imagines how it's dying. Like I can imagine that it is like uh you travel to your safe place. Like everybody has a different safe place, and as it was mentioned in the book report, women and the wives of soldiers were like the safe place for soldiers and for men at that at on those ages. It makes a lot of sense that his safe place, or where he travels, or where he tries to reach, while his mind tried to reach, while he is on the last minutes or last seconds of dying, is his wife. But I do believe that is an interesting thought to go to your safe place. It makes more sense than um, see your life in a minute, see your life pass through in a minute while you're in the seconds of dying. It makes more sense to me that is traveling metaphorically to your safe place.
That's interesting, very interesting, because the story explores somehow the mental process of someone facing this life or death situation, and it's about facing this situation, which is going to be faced by all of us. From what perspective? Is it denial? Is it embracing? Is it having these, what you mentioned, flashbacks, like having like the very most important moments of your life in a couple of seconds, or as you mentioned, going to secure like a refuge, right? For you.
Yes,
That's an interesting point.
yes, I would say that is the escape of mind. Like, um, nobody wants to die, and like now, and his death is it was he looked for his death when he went to face the soldiers to the bridge. Like he already knew. Maybe he didn't knew that he was going to die, but he knew that he was going into a like
He had to face some consequences,
exactly.
but he
Thank you.
he didn't know uh, what were the consequences. So
Yes, and like the effort of this is like what I think what the author is trying to point out is that we can't escape death. We
mm,
can. Like we can go to our safe place at the moment of dying and we can try to live as long as we can, like I don't know, doing everything that you can do, but you can escape death.
Mm. I mean, and it's the mystery of life because it makes you reflect on the way that we are so fragile on this destiny that we someday all going to die. But for me, when reading this book, well, this short story, because as we said, it has 10 pages. Um, at one moment in the second part, when the author shows us this trying to escape from the reality that he was facing, I thought one moment that he really escaped from
yeah,
from the soldiers, because the description, the setting was really well described, and all the actions had this coherence that maybe if you can start with analyzing that, if it's an imaginary situation, you cannot have this kind of coherence in your mind, because maybe you will have some flashbacks and you will go to maybe I don't know, in my case, at my parents' house, and then I will go to maybe a park that I love going to. But this had these coherence actions that at some point I thought he did it. But then I read the final part and it was like these two ending sentences that he said Peyton Farquhar was dead. And I was like, this
what?
is something. Yes,
Yeah,
it was
the,
like,
the
Didn't
same
you
thought
feel
as
cheated
you.
about that
yes, of course.
as a
Yeah.
reader?
Yes,
Yes,
the three of us, I think we were in the same page. Like,
Yeah.
oh, he did it. And no, he didn't.
And when I was doing my research about the author too, I saw that many critics said that this was one of his biggest strengths because he wrote so well the story to make us believe that this has happened, and then the plot twist just changes everything, and he's like really admirable for that.
yeah.
Yes,
And the
I
narrative
would.
style that he used to develop this story,
Yeah.
like going back to the past and then to the future to the present, it was giving this dramatic feeling to the audience or the
Play,
readers.
playing with the time. I
Yes.
would say
Yeah.
nothing better than a good plot twist in a story. So yeah,
Actually, that is one of Pierce's strength, right? The quality in his writing style
Yeah.
to use flashbacks, right, and foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is actually the way that keeps the reader's attention in order to elaborate the plot and then give the final strike with a completely twist of events, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
totally.
Now, Lisette mentioned about facing consequences, right? That when the main character, I don't remember if the comment that Lisette made was like according to the story itself or a general comment about facing consequences for someone's death or for your actions. So, Lisette, do you think he was actually facing the consequences or he was actually facing death? Don't you think that somehow
Um,
he was avoiding it at some point? What's your
I don't,
perception?
I don't, I don't think he was avoiding it because he was trying to actually burn the bridge down, and he knew he would face some consequences, but he didn't know which were the consequences. He only knew that maybe he was going to be, I don't know, incarcerated or something. But then the soldiers just decided to hang him, and as an example for other civilians, to not do the same he was doing.
So do you think you said that they were sending a message to other civilians? Because these
Yeah.
acts of hanging a person took place in this military sessions, very rigid, very formal. So
Mhm.
in which way was the message sent? What do you think?
I think it was to not confront this part of the soldiers, because they were two ends. They were the Confederate, and I forget the other one. But they were two teams, to say that. And it was like, okay, do not play with us. So this is what will happen to you if you try to confront us.
Right, the Confederate and the Union, right?
Yeah, the Union.
Okay. Do you think that if death, uh, eh, this might be answered by anyone, right? If death could have been treated, because death is an important aspect of the story. Do you think it would, if it had been treated in a different setting or in a different context? I mean, do you think that having the military surrounding and executing this gentleman would have been different in a different context? Say being hanged by an angry mob, not military. Uh, do you think the treatment of this kind of death, like being hanged by a mob of like angry people, running a place, taking the person into the custody and hanging the person, do you think would have been different to the connotation of the death, the final end for this character?
um, can you repeat the last part of the question, please?
Sure, because if we see someone being hanged by a group of people, by a crowd, for instance, a
Mhm.
crowd that I don't know, find out that this person committed a crime, and according to the crowd, he deserved hanging. So, do you think the connotation would have been different for death equally, this in the same circumstances by a different group of people, not military? But lots of civilians, for instance, angry civilians.
Yes, yes, it would have been the same because it is not like a point on history, like the only time on history where people were hanged.
That happened.
Like, yes,
Yeah, it was like a normal thing in that
it, yeah,
era.
those times, like we
Mhm.
have the, for instance, at the top of my mind the French Revolution, where the people were hanged. Also, like the witch trials where women were hanged. So it
Right.
was something very common
Yeah.
on that era to hang people because as a punishment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been the same. And besides, the fact that um, Farka was hanged because he tried to. They were in war, so they were from different sides of the word worth war. Sorry. So yes, the Union were trying to send a message to the Confederate that to stop slavery, and we like I would imagine that I would say that there is a lot of people that were hanged for the same reason. Like, this is what's going to happen to you if you are not, you don't submit to our um, petitions.
Yes. And I will add that
Yes.
even in this last decades happens something that is, I will say, the same like hanging a person in front of the rest of the civilization when there is a war, sorry, um, a civil war in a country. You can see that two ideologies, maybe two religions or two opponents' ideas are confronting, and there's always a huge damage to the families that the people are killed. I mean, they are not hanged, but they are killed in different circumstances. So they confront the death, maybe because they have a different opinions from the others. This happened in our country like 40, 30 years ago. And it happened now recently in Colombia with these manifestations and these
Yeah.
protests against the country government. So they are always killed. There's always this concept of um, like removing this idea because minds is the one that should be like potentially believed.
Also,
Right.
is a strong statement to kill someone to
Yes.
message.
Mhm.
So yes, like
It,
it
it
would
is
be
a
the
normalized thing in any war and revolution, and it is normal, I think.
it shouldn't
Not
be.
not now, not now, and it shouldn't be, but it's
It
normalized.
shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Like as Javiera was mentioning, like it is common to send a message through that.
Yeah.
Are you there? You
Yes,
were.
yes, I'm here. I was looking for the mic icon. Um, yeah, the idea of providing punishment through any type of death um, technique, right? Anything that is applied to a person involves a connotation. And actually, I totally agree with you that the message, I mean, there's a very clear statement in hanging a person towards the opposite band. And it's about, I would get, I guess, the dignity of the human being, the impossibility to defend. I wouldn't say that being hanged is an honorable death. I would say that it ranks between the least honorable ones. Um, I understand that in United States, because the this takes place in United States, the last human being to be hanged was in the 1930s, maybe the 1930s. Um, so if we think about this type of punishment that gives death to a human being, it still took place in the 1900s. So how
Yes.
much have we evolved? Uh, you see, maybe
Yeah.
not much.
Yeah, it could be said, but I would say that the soldiers that were hanged, like for instance Farquaad maybe, uh they were hanged, but people that are very into their beliefs and their like uh, defend what they believes like until the last circumstances, uh I would say that it was honorable for them to die no matter how defending their
Yeah.
beliefs. Maybe not now, but I'm talking about the eras, like those years. Like
Yeah.
they were really not happy, but they were um committed to death, to dying because of their beliefs. And their beliefs were that they wanted slaves, so maybe they deserved it.
Mhm.
Right. But people who are committed to their beliefs also die today in many, many different areas of the world, right? So, but hanging, it's not a punishment that it's given nowadays. Now, when you are at a war, there are special codes. There's um, martial courts, I think, that take place, not the ones in a regular, ordinary jurisdiction, but these military system that takes over the civilian, and so the any act of treason, right? It's usually punished with death because in a war, when a country is at war, there's the regular system does not apply, so it's a different system. If you commit a crime and it's against the country, you have to die. So there's no way around it. It's the way it is, and military are quite strict and rigid about these ideas, right? There's no forgiveness. They just do it, and they're quite formal. So probably I was thinking maybe this formality gives the main character some time to ponder and go back in a flashback that maybe if let's suppose that the character is being hanged by an angry mob, by a crowd, right? Probably they're not going to give him the time to think and go back in time, right? Because you know, things
Yeah.
carry out very, very violently, I
Of
guess, when um, when a criminal is being hanged. So
But I
it,
would say that it doesn't matter if you are if your process of dying happens along hours or seconds, you will still have that epiphany of your life of like I was saying before, like the epiphany of I'm going to my safe place, because I think it has to do with some chemical reaction. Like you're there is a component that I don't remember the name, but I will try to find it out. That your brain liberates at the moment of your death, and it's only liberated when at the moment of your death. So I think it doesn't matter if you have like a second to die or hours, you will liberate that anyways.
interesting. Whenever you find out that information, do share it, please, with the rest of us.
Of
I
course,
think it
I
is apnea or something like that, or no?
I
The
can't
word
remember.
I will try to
I
find it.
read.
I will bring it to Thursday maybe.
I think Amnia gives some positive thoughts to people, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see that probably in next class if Maria Ignacia, if
Brings
you are
the
so kind
information.
to, yeah, to share it later, because I really like the way you see death. So I'm really looking forward to having this sort of happy moment going back to my safe place whenever I die. Might that be?
I will find the I follow a channel on YouTube that is called Bezos, and he gives all these facts about science. So I will find the video and I will find a source for the video, because he has sources for their videos, and I will bring it back on Thursday.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. It's yeah, time for us to finish today's session. Thanks so much. Interesting topic, maybe not for this time of the day, but it's interesting to think about death and the way we're going to face it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somehow. You're young, you have we think we have time. I'm middle-aged. I think I still have time, but you never know. You
Yeah.
never
And
know.
with this pandemic situation, I mean, it is
Yes.
even worse.
Yeah. Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank
Good
you.
job. I'll see you next
Thank
class.
Thank you.
Don't
Bye
forget
bye.
the information.
I will
Bye.
bring it back.
Okay. Bye-bye. Goodbye,
Have a
everyone.
nice day.
You too. Thank you. You
Bye,
too.
Rosa. Take care.
You too. Thank you.